Every project we have has an opportunity, and that's what we should do as architects, is find those opportunities. They're not always given to us. Typically, they're never given to us.
Welcome to Archimania, an architectural firm in Memphis, Tennessee. The voice you just heard belongs to Barry Yoakum, a co partner at the firm. Barry has been practicing architecture nearly all his life and is a self proclaimed modernist at heart. One look at his dossier of work, and there's no contesting that claim. But what's not as immediately obvious is just how progressive his designs are when it comes to sustainability. Begin to peel back the layers, however, and you discover a series of brave experiments and an honest and heartfelt endeavor to crack the code on reducing the built environment's impact and creating greater connectivity.
You're at 663 South Cooper. That's home of Archimania. These two buildings were built in 1957, so they're mid-century modern. We reinvented them and applied a lot of principles that we've learned on other projects to elevate and actually get to a point where they were ILFI, International Living Future Institute, certified zero energy, zero carbon. So the second one in the world to be certified by ILFI for that dual certification, but also the first renovation, which is a big deal. The fascinating thing for us is this is really a laboratory, a living laboratory for the firm and how we do work, especially on renovation work. So we were told you can't make zero energy, zero carbon in the hot, humid South. Well, we did it, and we did it very cost effectively, or we wouldn't be able to do it because we invested our money.
Barry and his team are no strangers to testing conventional approaches. It's a common theme throughout most of their projects. This project at 663 South Cooper, however, was an audacious endeavor into true resiliency that stretched well beyond zero carbon and zero energy targets. They wanted to see if they could create a model for developing connected, carbon neutral, and human centered districts using Middle America's aging commercial corridor building stock as the bedrock. And it began with the purchase and upcycling of two adjacent buildings, one of which would serve as the control.
So what we did was try to reinvent the project with the good bones that it had. We have two buildings. The reason we really like the two buildings is it allowed us to build the smaller building of about 3,500 square feet as a code-only building. Then we did all the aspects of creating a zero energy, zero carbon building in this building. So we have a 1-to-1 ratio. There's a design firm that leases from us in a comparable service, and they have similar criteria as we do, similar density. So we really have a 1-to-1 ratio when we want to check how these two buildings perform.
The other opportunity for us moving into the Midtown area is there is this connectivity to amenities from the arts and public parks to housing, affordable housing, restaurants, and a variety of other kind of things that you would love to have access to if you're going to kind of make this your home away from home. And the site really offered that opportunity to better connect with the community, and by elevating the space as a public courtyard, it allows us to actually welcome the community onto the site throughout the year, which is something in a typical office environment you're not able to do, nor is it really part of the program. And so that was really important to the goals for the space, was that connectivity and openness.
Another key driver behind this project was achieving the 2030 challenge. Archimania is one of more than 1,300 architecture firms that have signed the AIA's 2030 commitment to reach carbon neutrality by 2030. To assert their commitment and create one potential pathway for others to follow, they were determined to achieve this goal a full decade early, and they did. Along the way, something unexpected happened, something much bigger than they had anticipated. And it wasn't the awards and recognition, of which there were many, it was the manifestation of what they're calling carbon neutral corridors.
Is when you set off to do something like that, you're not expecting to get these kind of awards and recognition. You're doing it for a reason of a pursuit. We wanted to prove that we could do it, and we wanted to do it 10 years before it was required by 2030, and we did. What that became was our office is now turned into a project we call Carbon Neutral Corridors, and that's attracted funding nationally on our research grant to see how that would change this entire Cooper Street corridor if everybody did what we did, and what the net effect across this corridor would be. So you don't always find these moments that you're trying to match a piece of property to. We're just fortunate we found a 1957 set of buildings that a lot of people would think would be a tear down, and we saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah, and there are communities all across the country that are facing the same
issue.
Challenges of how do we activate historic centers of communities in a way that maintains and protects the fabric of that community, which in a lot of ways is the architectural connections that you've had as kids growing up and as adults being kind of active in a space. How do we show this as a model to communities in other areas that are trying to find solutions? And unfortunately, those solutions have resulted in tear downs and almost a recreation of a community's identity. And that's not what we wanted to do. And it provided a great opportunity to say it can be done.
So how did they do it? One word: layers. Inspired by the book titled Spacesuit, Fashioning Apollo, it occurred to Barry that if this suit could be used to sustain human life in the most extreme environmental elements using a series of interrelated layers, 21 to be exact, just maybe the same model could be applied to the built environment.
This whole idea of the Apollo spacesuit and how it's about layers, and that got to be the story. A lot of that layering, how do you put layers on things to actually protect the inhabitants? That's what the storyline started becoming. That was a connection point. So it starts at this very micro level, and you make one little move and look at the impact across, whether it's a few thousand, 2,800 square feet or 7,600 square feet or several million square feet. The impact's same for one little layer move. How do you use layers to your benefit like a spacesuit does?
This layered approach became fundamental to achieving their tenacious goal because, in addition to meeting the 2030 challenge criteria for carbon neutrality, there were also a number of challenging existing conditions that had to be taken into account. First, there was the fact that they were attempting to retrofit a pair of mid-century buildings on a budget. Next, there was the Memphis sand aquifer that resides below the surface. And finally, the adjacent New Madrid seismic
We
zone.
live in one of the worst seismic zones in the country, very similar to San Francisco, which people are hard to believe. So this is Memphis. We're right on a fault line that runs about 100 miles from here along the Mississippi River. And we actually came up with an idea beyond even our structural engineers how to make this seismically retrofitted in a very cost-effective way.
And the environmental considerations for this space was critical on a lot of levels. We're also above the Memphis sand aquifer. And so sensitivity to the construction process, as well as how the site continues to perform and filter water that's used and produced through the site, is critical because we have to protect that water source. And so a lot of strategies, you come in and you think about the layers.
Layer by layer, they began to develop solutions and in the process found ways to create interrelated functionality between the layers. For instance, by converting the parking lot between the two buildings to a central courtyard, they were able to address the community and connectivity layer, the human health and well-being layer, as well as the water management and energy efficiency layers.
So it's not activated right now, but it is. You can see we have not only a place for break area for both us and our neighbors next door that lease from us, But it's also a convenient place to do setup for construction site material mock-ups of details that we're working on. This large screen gate out front is actually it's a pivot gate that can open on both sides. And that's where we connect with the community. We can have parties out here, which we've done. So it makes it more inviting. It's an interior, exterior piece of architecture that really makes it about community, which is a big deal to us.
On the sustainability front, the courtyard conversion also helped increase the permeability of the site from 2% to 60%, improving stormwater management. It also now houses part of the geothermal renewable energy system that was mission critical in getting them to zero carbon and zero energy.
All in that courtyard, all behind the building, and then all the way through the new parking lot are these loops. These loops are what makes it where we could get there. A conventional system would not get us to the point of being able to make it carbon neutral if we had not done that. We've got 88 loops that go down 29 feet. So they're like on about a 15-foot grid. And that had never been, the first time we did it was on Civitas, second time was this. Nobody in this area really would do that. And we came up with the idea because we're sitting on top of one of the nation's biggest aquifers. Mm-hmm. So we're really protective of our water supply. Well, if you go 30 feet or deeper, you're considered a well, and you can't do it in this city. So we had to think through all that, and we proposed, say, well, what if we just go down 29 feet? What can we do? And fortunately, our engineer said, yeah, you can do that.
This geothermal system essentially taps into the stable underground temperature via the looped pipes Barry referred to. The network of pipes works much like a condenser on an HVAC unit, but in this case, the system is taking advantage of the constant temperature of the Earth, which is generally around 55 degrees, and avoiding the massive temperature swings that occur above ground. This makes heating and cooling much more efficient.
I always say we don't know no until we know that we don't know no. So we keep asking questions. And then it's amazing what comes out of those questions.
It's really being able to look at materials and systems in a new way and bring people together around that experimentation to get to a solution that works. But you've got to be open and you've got to be creative and you've got to have the right team. And
By the numbers, they've been able to achieve a net energy use intensity, or EUI, of negative 1.3, producing 7% more power than consumed. They've also reduced the carbon impact by 67% by upcycling many of the existing materials, reduced water consumption by 76%, and avoided more than a dozen chemicals known to have adverse human health impacts by opting for products that were Declare, Cradle to Cradle, or Living Product Challenge certified. And if the neighboring buildings along Cooper Street corridor followed suit, they estimate it would eliminate more than 21 million pounds of carbon from the environment.
If everybody did what we did, it would totally change this neighborhood as far as its contribution to stitching the environment back together.
Of course, the Archimania team had human health, well-being, and chemical avoidance goals, but their Goliath on this project was encapsulated in 3 C's: carbon, community, and connectivity, and chief among them was addressing carbon.
You can get lost in other categories and forget that the bottom line is, are we not trying to stop and reverse carbon, operational carbon and embodied carbon? And that's the harder to do. So the others seem to get equal attention, and yet we keep running from the issue is, well, what about carbon? We have to stop it. We have to reverse it. It's a harder one to do, and I think that's why you're not seeing as much progress in it. It's hard. Every project we have has an opportunity, and that's what we should do as architects, is find those opportunities. They're not always given to us. Typically, they're never given to us.
In the next episode, we'll explore Civitas, the project that helped inform Barry and the team of archimaniacs on constructing 663 South Cooper.